Paul Nobles from eattoperform.com. I am not sitting here with April Blackford. April is, for some reason, having trouble getting into the webinar. We have a smaller class today because this is our 3-month switch with the webinars, and for some reason, every 3 months, it sort of changes and decreases. And then the next week we end up having 20 to 30 people. But we do have, like 6 people right now. They haven't really come up with any questions at this point, but I'm expecting they will. So to get things kind of started off, I'll talk a little bit about Thanksgiving weekend, which, if you're in the United States, is kind of a big deal, mostly because for a lot of people it ends up being kind of a stressful time, especially if you're trying to lose fat or trying to stick with some kind of diet or something of this nature. What we typically recommend is a little bit more of a relaxed approach. One of the things that I have admitted to many times is that I weigh myself daily. There is one day a year I don't, though, and that is the day after Thanksgiving. We actually have 2 Thanksgivings because my wife's family has Thanksgiving on Saturday. Usually that Thanksgiving is something that we don't go as all out as we would the Thanksgiving that we do on Thursday. So it's usually a little bit easier to control portion sizes and things of this nature. The other thing, like Saturday, as an example, I'm trying to think. I don't think that I exercised that day. The opportunity just didn't come up. Well, no, actually, I was going to WOD earlier in the morning, and then I didn't wake up till later, so there was no opportunity. So that's why I didn't do anything. I did do my long endurance day. For those that don't know, I do a long endurance day once a week. It has been roughly Friday or Saturday, and I'll describe the workout so you guys get an understanding of what it means, because a lot of people think long endurance and they think running, and this is actually, running was a small part of it, but it wasn't the whole deal. But I did kind of figure something out this week that I think I'm going to use going forward. Is my long endurance I've been doing on Fridays or Saturdays, and so this is sort of giving me the opportunity to try something different. And so having my long endurance on Sunday actually sets up a little bit easier, and let me explain to you why. My long endurance days typically are followed by rest day, which is today, which I did rest, and then the following day, so you have to imagine it's like it's Friday or Saturday. And so let's say Friday I did long endurance, Saturday I did a rest day, and then Sunday I would go heavy. Well, it always kind of conflicted, and there was always a little bit of an issue. I can always work out on Sunday. It's a great time for me. But there was always a problem going heavy on those days. And so rather than using that as my heavy day, this is always a rest day because of the webinars and things of that nature, and just as sort of the first part of the week. And so I just allow myself to not have to worry about working out on that day. And then on Tuesday is an open gym opportunity, and so that looks like that's going to be a good day for me to go heavy. And so it's really a good fit. I think I am going to move my long endurance to Sunday because of that. Once again, if you guys have any questions, just hit me with them. Until you have that, I'll bore you with my workouts and Thanksgiving routine. My long endurance days, and actually this is something that I think a lot of people should be doing, especially if you CrossFit, because typically you kind of get into this rut of 8 to 15 minute workouts, or maybe 20 to 25 minutes. But these long endurance sessions that I'm talking about tend to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. This one was an hour and a half. It was, I think it was 4 800-meter runs. It was 2,000-meter rows. Now I broke them up. Well, in the case of the 2,000-meter rows, it was 8 250s, and then I did first I did some burpees over the rower, and then I did my 800-meter run, and then I did like an every minute on the minute jump roping and ring dips, and then I came back and did the 250 times 8 with hand release push-ups. And so all in all, it took me about an hour and a half. I wasn't trying to kill myself. It was sort of a relaxing type of workout, but I was able to kind of stick with it the whole time, without taking a whole lot of breaks. So if anybody has any questions on how I set up that like hybrid style of training, just let me know. It's based off of Alex Vieda's training, which Alex is a ultra marathoner and a power lifter, which is probably fits my goals a little bit more than, say, training for the CrossFit Games, which, let's be honest, I'm not making the CrossFit Games anytime soon. So let's see. Jennifer's saying, just signed up for a half marathon that is 6 months away and need to start training. I am by no means a runner. Do CrossFit 3 times a week and yoga Pilates 2 times a week. Plan on incorporated running in the morning, but definitely do not want to back off my other exercise because those are the ones I actually enjoy. What changes would you recommend, if any, to my macros? And am I being way too ambitious, not backing off my other training? Probably you are being too ambitious, not backing off your other training. I think that it really sort of depends. I mean, you want to work up your work capacity, right? That's sort of what I'm trying to do. What I think you should do is, I do that long endurance day. Like I said, it wasn't running. You can do like long endurance that's not running, and it keeps it more interesting that way. So that's something I would consider if I was you. But the other part is the mistake that people make when they start training for half marathons and things like that. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not gonna say that I would crush it or that I would, do like, great. But I could walk out the door and run a half marathon right now, and I don't know if like your plan is to try and get a certain time or something of that nature, but if you, are relatively, you can sort of see my dog in the background. Sorry for that. But if your goal is just to complete the half marathon, honestly, your training should be fine. The only thing that I would add would be some level of about a 30-minute. For me, that's like a 5K, 3-mile type thing, and then one long endurance day. Now, as you get closer to the event, you are going to want it to be running. But because running just basically takes a toll on you physically, and the reason why you train for that running is so you're ready for that toll. But I don't think that you need to necessarily have to do that right now. I think you can start working up. The problem with CrossFit, yoga, and Pilates is that these don't really test your long endurance. And so what I try to do, like I said, is have some level of long endurance, some level of WODs. Oh, we have April.
I am so sorry. I was having some serious technical issues.
Yeah, no problem. We've got a few questions up to this point, and currently I'm answering a question related to someone training for a half marathon. And one of the questions that she asked was, should she up her macros? This is probably the biggest thing that I teach people that I don't hear from most people. When you do long endurance or when you do cardio, definitely you want more food in that scenario. And so what you sort of see, I mean, could you get away with less food? Sure. Okay. But is that going to allow the adaptation that you need to ultimately get to, you know, being able to do a half marathon comfortably? My opinion would be no. And what I think people forget about is that when you do long endurance for an hour and a half to 2 hours, I mean, you're essentially burning up to 1,500 to 2,000 calories. And so, depending on the pace and things of that nature, worst case scenario is 1,200 to 1,500. That's still a lot more food than people are normally eating on a daily basis. So, what I suggest is you subtract out, your percentage. Like for instance, let's say that you were eating 2,400 calories, right? Each hour would be 100 calories, so you would subtract that out, right? And then your daytime hours are a little different from your nighttime hours, so kind of factor that in at about 150 that you would have normally burned per hour, and then subtract that, and then sort of add food to adjust to the additional work that you're doing. Because what you're saying is, should I add food? Am I being too aggressive adding in this running with the CrossFit? I would say no, as long as you're adding food to compensate for it. If you're not adding food to compensate for it, what you're going to see is like this big, huge drag. And that's not something that I think you want to do. Let's see. She's saying her current macros: protein 170. She's 250 to 125 on carbs. On non-workout days is the 125, and fat is 80. I would say on a long endurance day, well, a short endurance day like a 3 mile where you're not doing anything else, you can kind of keep your carbs at about 250. And then on that longer day, that would be a good day for to have pizza or something of that nature, to kind of, I hate the idea of cheat meals. I even hate the idea of treat meals, right? But it's sort of hard to fit in the amounts of food that you need. So it's a good day for date night. It's a good day for red wine. It's a good day for a lot of things like that. And she's saying, I won't say no to pizza, thanks. So that's how I would do it. Like I said, your carbs would probably go 350 to 400. That's okay on that day, and that's going to help your recovery. So if you have any other questions about that, but just remember, what we're doing with Eat to Perform is we're trying to get enough food in you to expand your work capacity, and then once you've built up that better engine, if you have fat to lose as an example, then we would gradually address that. So this brings up an interesting point, and we'll move on because they have a few other questions that are starting to come up. But this brings up an interesting point, and we get this a lot with our athletes that we talk about, that are training for like the CrossFit Games or something like that. When you are training for something, you want to be fed the whole time. So if you're going to train for a half marathon for 6 months, there's no dieting, okay? So you're going to have to make that choice. And in my opinion, that's a correct choice to make. That's going to be the thing that ultimately helps you get that engine, that's going to allow for greater work capacity. Then what you do is you take that work capacity after you're done with your event, and then we cut. And then we look at a short burst of dieting where we might look at, losing 8 to 10 pounds or something of that nature. And usually that's a little bit easier to do because you've been eating, say 2,500 calories as a female say 3,500 calories as a male. Then once we take 500 calories a day, that's a pound a week. It only takes 8 weeks to kind of get to your goal. So does that make sense? I mean, when you're training to get better at something, you don't also want to be dieting because it causes stress. Ultimately, that ends up leading to sleep issues and all kinds of funky stuff. So if you're training for something, eat for it. If you're training to use a half marathon, I'm not saying that you are, but some people will use a half marathon to try and lose a bunch of weight, and so they'll end up eating less, and they end up creating these huge deficits, and then they operating on 5 hours sleep and all this other kind of nonsense, when in reality they'd be just much better off dieting outside the times that they're training. So I just thought that was a really interesting point, because that's something that a lot of people don't talk about that I think is really important as you're training for events. April, do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying there?
I actually agree. Just a prime example is you don't see competitors going to the games on a diet. They'll generally, diet prior to start, amping their training up, then they start, being properly fed.
Actually, that's not true. It's one of the silliest things that you'll ever see. Is you'll see a lot of people, right? They'll qualify for regionals or something of that nature, and then they'll go, well, gosh, it would be so much easier to do pull-ups if I lost 10 pounds. I saw this over and over again, not from people that because there's a lot of people that we work with. There's a lot of people that follow Eat to Perform, but they're more familiar with it rather than they do it, right? And so I was seeing a lot of people that were dieting like up to the day of the event, and of course they just tanked, because they're under this mistaken impression that, certainly if you're 10 pounds lighter, it's going to be better for pull-ups and things like that. But you address that 6 months before. You don't address that right before the event. And so while April is totally correct in the way that we advise clients, we're pretty honest with people when they show up on January 1st and say, hey, I want to go to regionals, I want to do this or that. We're like, well, how confident are you're going to make it past the Open? Because typically we would have wanted to address that in September. So let me get to Adele's question. She's saying, hi, Paul, I have questions. Let's start with a company called DNAfit.com. I'm getting a DNA health and fitness assessment with them. Concept here is they will tell me if my genetics are most suited to eating fats or carbs and power or endurance focus workouts. My goal is to tweak my macros and training plan according to the report so I can lose more of this stubborn fat. Do you have any personal experience with this company or DNA testing? I'm referring to this. I'm not familiar with DNA testing per se, but we do see a lot of that type of stuff where people talk about blood type testing and things of that nature. And frankly, the technologies aren't advanced at this point to where they could realistically tell you. But truthfully, you can figure this out on your own. I can tell you, for myself, that I'm pretty carb sensitive. I can't, have 500 grams of carbs on a daily basis. You can tend to figure this out, but here's how you figure it out. You figure it out by pushing the top end of your carbs rather than going, I'm carb sensitive. Everybody I talk to thinks that they're sensitive to carbohydrates, right? Meanwhile, what we typically do is we address it with fats in a lot of instances when people are cutting, and they tend to see really good results. And so I'd be a little leery of that. You've already spent your money. Let's see. getting a health and fitness assessment. I mean, if you've already sent the money, it's probably enlightening information. It's not, you know, the way that I look at things like that, that is something I would be very interested in doing, right? But I would look at it as one metric amongst the whole portfolio of information that I have related to body fat test, related to scale weight, related to all these different things. And so if you can look at it from that standpoint, I think you'll benefit from it more rather than going, this is the solution. The fact of the matter is the solution, really is a lot simpler than most people think. Well, for instance, if you look at, I don't know much about your thing, but if you look at blood type diets, okay, what they really are doing is just focusing on a deficit. That's ultimately when paleo works, they got a deficit. When the zone works, they got a deficit. But what none of them seem to address is the other end, where you actually get back to maintenance and you actually get back to normal. April, are you familiar with DNA testing at all? I mean,
I have actually never heard of it, but I just wanted to add in when you were having the discussion in regards to, to people, a lot of people assume that they're or think that they're sensitive to carbs. A lot of times I actually kind of find it humorous that so many people think that they're sensitive to carbs when they carry their fat so high, when basically fats are more calorie dense than carbs are. You would actually, if you're afraid to eat the carbs, why not eat half of the carbs and drop your fats down, a third of where you have them, and you'll still be in a calorie deficit anyway.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, all these diets tend to come down to, where, I mean, certainly there is always some level of sensitivity to insulin. If, for instance, you carried a lot of fat, you've lost a lot of weight, those folks tend to be, and I'm actually in that same boat. Right, I used to be, obese. Really, I mean that's the easiest way to say it, and so I do have to be a little careful, but that's one of the reasons why having a higher work capacity works out in your favor. I think the problem that you run into in these scenarios is that it becomes so fat loss focused and so deficit focused that you never really allow yourself to kind of get to the other end, and that's where the secret is. That's where the magic is. Sam, my other question: can you explain why too much exercise is detrimental to fat loss? I think I'm experiencing this, going from 40 minutes of weights to 90 minutes 4 times a week, and I gained 7 pounds in a month. Going into a cut, and I'd like to understand why dialing back intensity is recommended. Had my adrenals tested and they're fine. I'm hypothyroid though, and Hashimoto's, so it's possible this is playing a role. What you're talking about, all the questions that you're asking, and I see a lot of people that get like these expensive cortisol tests and all these other types of things. Basically, when you work out too much and you don't eat very much, and you don't sleep very much, it creates like this, super stressful environment for you. And so that's really the answer to it's really a lot simpler than people tend to want to make it out to be, right? The reason why we suggest that people cut back their volume is because if, for instance, you don't work out and you're at a deficit on that day, that's obviously less stressful. If you're trying to work out your way into a deficit, see, this is why when I talked earlier about my long endurance days, what am I doing on my long endurance days? I'm feeding my long endurance days, right? So you're feeding the days that you're working out. I will say this: what we teach is a patient approach. You're not going to lose 20 to 30 pounds. In the scenario where you're saying that you gain 7 pounds in a month, I don't know what the scenario would be with that. I don't know why that might exist for you without looking at your macros. But when when you break it down, it tends to come down to macros. I mean, certainly, well, like, let me give you an example. Let's say that your macros are roughly the same, nothing's really changed, but you're working out more, and instead of sleeping 7 hours a day, you're sleeping 4 hours a day. Now, all of a sudden, um, you're going to be more inflamed, you're not going to recover as well, and so therefore your weight might be up as a result. And so I just gotta warn you, paying for expensive tests and things of that nature, honestly, you sound like the type of person that is really, really super into, getting fat loss, and that's awesome. But if you apply some level of patience and some level of understanding, see, when you start paying for these expensive cortisol tests and DNA tests and all this other type of stuff, it implies that there's something wrong with you that's different, that you're different than everybody else somehow, and you may be a little bit, but it's always marginally different. It's not these monstrous differences. And so if you're constantly eating less, you're trying to work out more, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's, the way that you're asking these questions, it almost seems like you want to think it's really super complex. And frankly, I'm not sure how much you've tried. I mean, have you tried eating adequate amounts of food with a good plan, getting your macros set, given, a plan like that? She might take a few minutes to respond.
I think she's fairly new.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think she's just a couple of days new, so she's probably coming from under eating. Just to fill in, when she was talking about gaining the 7 pounds just by basically doubling her activity on the days that she does.
Yeah.
Basically, a similar thing happened to me 8 years ago when I dieted. Basically, did a lower calorie diet on 1,500-1,600 calories a day. Lost a bunch of weight, did not exercise, and then once I got to the lowest weight I had ever been, I decided, well, I need to start working out. So I started working out, and within 2 months of adding in exercise and eating the exact same diet, I basically gained 15 pounds.
Yeah.
It just shows, you just drove your body further down into, more stress than it already was.
Right.
So other than, adding the energy expenditures on top of the diet, that's the only thing I changed.
Yeah, she's not answering for some reason. So, she was, I'm kind of hoping to get that information, but she was very interested in telling us about DNAfit.com and these other places that, honestly, I feel like a lot of that is hocus pocus bullshit. I just, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be helpful as a piece of information. It might be. It's certainly something that I would be very interested in doing just to see what the results would be. But I would always take something like that with a grain of salt, and research the hell out of it. I mean, that's what we do. And that's what everybody should be doing. Is they should really look at, rather than grasping onto that one thing that, oh my God, that totally sounds like me, do your research, Google, I mean, almost everything that we talk about at Eat to Perform started from Google, started from PubMed research, and then talking to PhDs and doctors and, these types of people. And so that research is available to everybody. Let's see, Teddy was asking, how do you do your 800-meter interval style training? Do you go all out, then rest, or take it easy? Well, I definitely do not go all out. The goal is 140 to 150 heart rates per minute, or how do they say, HRM?
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, I started with the 800-meter run. I switched. Well, I'm trying to think. No, I didn't switch shoes. I was gonna switch shoes, or did I switch shoes? No, I didn't switch shoes. Um, but I would have switched shoes, right? So that would be an example where I'm taking a little bit of a break before I move on to the rower. It's kind of a seamless transition, but I'm not trying to kill myself. Like I said, I'm trying to get an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of work at a good pace. I will say this, all that rowing, my back is pretty sore, and I was really sort of focusing on the tensing of the back in the movement. Now, in terms of the 250-meter row, I was pushing that a little bit more just because I can. The running, by the way, this was in 5 to 10 degree weather, so I wasn't going to really push it. My right hamstring towards the end of the run was getting a little tight, and I was a little scared of kind of slipping on the ice or something of that nature, and so I wasn't super aggressive with that. The really hard part was the jumping rope, though, and the body weight dips. I would do 5 dips, and then the rest of the minute I would jump rope. And I mean, within I'd say 3 to 4 minutes, I was like, wow, this is really hard, really quickly. So yeah, I think it really does keep it interesting, and that's what sort of makes it fun. It's also a way to kind of get in a little bit. I mean, for instance, if I just rode a 10K, right? I mean, I'd probably be hurting pretty badly. This is actually one of the benefits. The day after Thanksgiving, I didn't actually talk about this. The day after Thanksgiving, I hammered legs with back squats. I downsetted back squats, and then I was doing overhead lunges with a plate. And my legs are still kind of recovering from that. It was a lot of work, and I normally don't get too sore like that. And one of the benefits of CrossFit is that you tend to not get sore like that. So like people who do bodybuilding workouts and things of that nature, they sort of know that point where they can really hammer themselves. CrossFit, you tend to not be as sore. At least I don't think you are. At least if you're eating adequate amounts of food. If you're eating inadequate amounts of food, you will tend to get sore. If you're not sleeping, you will tend to get sore. So those are things to consider. Does that make sense, Teddy? But yeah, I mean, the goal of that day is 1:30 to 2 hours of lower intensity work. And the idea is just to expand your work capacity. And it's sort of, I kind of, was looking at what I would call the workout. And one of the things I was going to call it was clean the pipes, because it does kind of clean you out. You get all that breathing in, and that's good for fat oxidation for sure, but it is also a good opportunity to, like I said, take in a good amount of food, take in an appropriate amount of protein, starches, things of that nature to kind of build your system. So yes, it does. So you keep it pretty general, just as long as you get some type of activity in. Is there any type of progression scheme at all, or just kind of freestyling? I just do what I like to do because it's a day that is typically harder. And so, for instance, if I run 7 to 10 miles on that day, I will have no problem walking. In fact, I would say that the first 3 miles, I tend to walk a little bit more than I do towards the end. I sort of find that groove, where you're not dealing with shin splints and things of that nature. And then that last 4 to 7 miles, tends to be a little bit easier, and I don't need to rest as often. But I can see how other people might. Breaking it up is just kind of fun. It keeps it interesting, and so I like doing that. It just sort of depends. It's funny though, because I don't normally look forward to that day, but when I'm doing it and afterwards, it feels great. You because like Jennifer was talking earlier with the half marathon. I mean, there's just not a lot of people that can take that kind of beating on their body, and the fact that I was looking at it, and it was roughly the equivalent of like 6.5 to 7 miles. Be able to go 6.5, 7 miles. That's that's serious work. That's a 10K, and so not everybody is accustomed to doing that. And I think the more you can work yourself into that, the better off your overall fitness state will be. And that should be something I think everybody should incorporate, because a lot of people don't like it. The only people that really like it tend to be the people that don't like the other stuff. They don't tend to do the weightlifting and there's a high intensity work and things like that. They just do low intensity work. And I think you should always strive towards a varied form of fitness. And it's sort of interesting. I think Teddy knows, April knows. I was sick for kind of it seemed like more than a month, and so I'm sort of getting back into the game here. I'm still sort of undecided on the whole cutting thing in January. It's interesting. I weighed myself this morning. I was probably a half pound heavier than I normally am, but after a whole weekend of Thanksgiving type stuff. So, I'm feeling pretty good about that. And I mean, basically just came down to a couple days where I just, went without dessert, kind of had, do the standard Metflex stuff where, around my workouts I loaded, like last night, yesterday was the long endurance, had Chipotle afterwards, had a little dessert, then for dinner just had a steak and a salad, and really no dessert to speak of. Normally I would have a dessert, so that sort of helped things along a little bit. How did your holiday go? I know you had that Okinawan sweet potato dish.
Yeah,
That
that
amazing.
was actually a big hit. Unfortunately, because I went to my sister's house and there was way too much food, but majority of it, because I can't eat dairy, majority of it I couldn't eat. So that's why I brought my own potato dish so I could at least have sweet potatoes. But that was a big hit, and I too went and did a major leg day. I did a major leg day the day after Thanksgiving, and I was super, super sore as well. I could barely sit on the toilet. So obviously that was a major win.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was really I actually didn't think I did all that much, because I only worked up to 185, and I was doing sets of fives, and I ended up doing like 10 sets of five, and then I downsetted to where I did the opposite. I did 10 reps 5 times, but they were like air squats, almost. And then I did the overhead lunge, kind of in between those two workouts. And ironically, I think it was the downset at 135 that actually did me in. All the other stuff was pretty sedate, really. Um, so I don't know if you know this, April, but we did have a little issue with the seminar because it's the first week after, I think, were you involved with the setup with you and Lori and Brian today?
No,
Um,
well, kind of, sort of. I actually sought out the new link because the old link was expired, and they told me, they basically said that that link was good, and I said, no, it's not. So, anyway, I
yeah.
got the new link, the new registration link posted in the forum, so kind of filling everybody in on that. So hopefully, everybody will catch up on that.
Well, we didn't have a big class today, and it's been sort of a long day, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and end it a little bit earlier because, as you know, we tend to not end early. More nights, more often than not, we tend to go a little long. So I appreciate everybody being here. If you guys have any follow-up questions, obviously always bring those to April. Um, I mean, if you want to try and squeeze something in last minute, just say, stop, wait, I wanted to have one question. But unless you do that, we're just going to shut this down. Um, anything interesting happen over the weekend, April?
Um, no, not really. Just same old. My husband turned 40, and he actually turned 40 last weekend, and it seems that we've celebrated his birthday 3 times. So
Yeah.
I basically told him that his birthday was over. The celebration's over. You only get to celebrate with so
He
much, and
knows
then
what he's doing, man. That's the way you do it. Birthday month.
I did go out and on Thanksgiving night, and I did go out and venture some late night, midnight madness shopping. So, and I scored some deals. So, other than that,
Yeah, we've been kind of busy with the Cyber Monday stuff and Reebok and, you know, actually, we're in the middle of a deal right now where, um, we used to have each perform apparel, and you see people in pictures and stuff with that on. Um, it looks like in 2015, our each perform apparel will be done by Reebok, which I'm pretty excited about. So
that's kind
that should be fun, and then it'll allow us to have T-shirts and stuff like that available for people, and so. Cool. Well, I'm going to shut things down. Like I said, if you're new, hop in the forums. There's tons of help there, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye. All right. Are you stuck?
no, it still says that it's live though.